Today's subject is defining the term woman. The Arabic term al-nisa is the plural of two different singular terms. First, of mar'a, woman, and second of nasi, deferment. The latter term refers to things that are delayed or postponed, nasi'a. For example, we say the delivery has been postponed or Zayd is late. Verse 37 of chapter 9 uses al-nisa in this sense. Verily, the transposing of a prohibited month, al-nisa'u, is an addition to unbelief, Tawba 37. And a hadith, if authentic, states, whoever likes his provision to be increased and his life to be extended, yansa. An example, his death postponed, yansa, should uphold the ties of kinship. The former term, in contrast, refers to either the opposite partner of men, an example, women, but in the sense of men's social, non-sexual companion, or to the plural of woman as a collective term. While incidentally, the feminine singular imra'a, a woman, has the same root as the male singular imra'un, for man. The conventional and rather primitive rendering of the creation story wants us to believe that Adam was created before his wife. According to the story, she was formed out of his ribs and thus entered the world after him. Unbelievable. Women are thought to be those who come after, lag behind, or are delayed. A misconception to which the following verse was believed to give full support. O mankind, reverence your guardian Lord, who created you from a single person, created of like nature his mate, Nisa 1. A more objective scientific understanding, however, can prove that at the beginning of creation there was no division into male and female creatures. The first organism were all single-celled. They increased in their number not by copulation and fertilization, but through cell division, mitosis. Only when evolution had reached the stage by which animals and humans reproduce life through procreative intercourse do we witness a simultaneous split into a male and female sex. In evolutionary terms, the traditional creation story simply does not make sense. Also, it is a biological fact that male sperm always produce embryos that initially are both male and female. Some scientists have claimed that they are initially all female. Thus, scientific research on the early stages of embryonic development also contradicts the hypothetical male first, female second story. As said before, the term nisa expresses the notion of delay, deferral, or postponement, and can refer to basically everything that might come later. We propose to understand nisa in this sense when we look at chapter 3 verse 14, which uses the term nisa when talking about people's love of things and objects eagerly desired, fared in the eyes of men. Zuyyina lil-nasi is the love of things they covet, nisa, and sons, heaped up hoards of gold and silver, horses branded for blood and excellence, and wealth of cattle, and a bonus in crops of wheat. Such are the possessions of this world's life, but in nearness to God is the best of the goal to return to. Al-Imran 14. In this context, nisa cannot possibly mean woman. First, because such a rendering would ignore the fact that the verse speaks about the desires of all people, al-nas, men and women, and not just men. Second, it would turn women into commodities and goods of pleasure that are no more than heaped up hoards of gold and silver, and on a par with horses, cattle, and well-tilled land. However, tempting it must be for some of the fuqaha, the scholars, and many sexist exegetics to regard women as part of their livestock, ranked as equal with cows, sheep, donkeys, oxen, and mules. We should resist such a ridiculous interpretation of Allah's speech. Instead, nisa were literally meant things that arrived last, that is good of the latest fashion, and whatever arrives last is the newest. The verse is absolutely accurate in saying that people in general, not just men, wants to purchase the most recent models, cars, mobile phones, clothes, CD players, designer spectacles, etc., etc. All over the world, people wants to follow the latest fashion and look down on things that are last year. This implies an endless cycle of consumption because what is hot in one year is old and out in the next year when it will be replaced by new arrivals. By what follows next, al-nisa. Al-nisa can also refer to people who come next or follow behind, as in the following verse, and say to the believing woman that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty in front of their women, as translated. أو نساءهن, as translated. Nur 31. This verse addresses the believing woman who should lower their gaze and guard their private parts. It then mentions those relatives in front of whom women are allowed to reveal their zina, explained later. One group being described as nisa'ahunna, usually translated as, an example, the believing woman's woman. But is it correct to say woman's woman? If we look at the sequence of the people given, except their husbands, their father, their husband's father, their sons, their husband's sons, their brothers' sons, their sisters' sons, their nisa, we notice that the verse does not continue to list those who come next. That is, the sons of the sons, or the sons of the brothers' sons, or the sons of the sisters' sons, and so on. And what could have potentially become an endless list and is efficiently condensed into the phrase of those who follow next, nisa. The same applies to verse 55 of Surah Ahzab. There is no blame on these ladies if they appear in front of nisa'uhunna. Chapter 33, verse 55. The term nisa here refers again to those males, the male relatives who follow those mentioned before. The verse of guardianship, chapter 4, verse 34. Having defined the crucial term of nisa and rijal, we are now in a position to understand the verse of guardianship. Rijal are the protectors and maintainers, qawwamuna of nisa, al-nisa, because God has given the one more strength than the other, and because they support them from their means. Therefore, the righteous women are qanitat, and guard what God would have them guard. As to those women on whose part you fear ill conduct, admonish them first. Next, refuse to share their beds. And last, beat them lightly, as translated by the scholars per se, as they say, but is wrong. Beat them. They use this word has the same problem what they had with the word nisa. It means it means one or more thing. We will come to it. But if they return, seek not against them means of annoyance, for God is most high, great above you all. Nisa 34. We have ruled out the possibility that the first line of the verse can be interpreted as men are the protectors and maintainers of women, because each of the two terms are al-rijal and al-nisa refer to both men and women in this context. Let us say it again. To assume that al-rijal means men and al-nisa woman is a serious mistake, because in this verse both terms are not gendered. Al-rijal refers to both men and women, and nisa means those who follow behind. Yes, of course, commonly al-rijal means men and nisa means women commonly, but not always. But we seem to take it for granted. We need to, of course, to identify the middle term that connects al-rijal and nisa. We know that the qawwamun are those in charge. Qawwamun, this is the middle term. Qawwamun. We know that the qawwamun are those in charge or those with power and competence. Many well-meaning feminists have tried to reverse the supposed sexism of the verse and claim that qawwamuna means standing in service, implying that men are not the masters but in fact the servants of women. This may sound quite appealing to some, but it is frankly very far-fetched. It still suggests that one should keep a division between men and women, even if husbands are now the alleged servants of their wives. It also fundamentally contradicts the next line of the verse: God has given to some, the rijal, more than others, al-nisa. Such preference given by God is incompatible with the notion of servitude. Some have claimed that this verse makes it clear that Islam, in contrast with other religions and cultures, does not want gender equality and hence treats men and women differently. We object to this because the verse does not exclusively address male believers, mu'minun, and female believers, mu'minat, the followers of Muhammad, but rather men and women in general. For us, this implies that the verse must have a high degree of universality, to the extent that it is applicable to men and women in Tokyo or Sao Paulo as it is to men and women in Cairo, Damascus, or Riyadh. Thus, we are not allowed to claim a higher or different status for the religion of Muhammad's followers. If we keep referring to the context of Mecca and Medina of the 7th century while reading God's revelation, we are bound to lose the book's universal message, while is valid in all places and at all times. The second line, God has given to some more than some other, is for some exegetes an indication of God's preference of men to women, since their interpretation of the first line is essentially gendered. They claim that God's preference for men explains why men are in charge of women, since it is, in their view, clearly stated in the first line. This ignores the fact that the text says some and not all. According to the scholar's interpretation, it would imply that God prefers some men to some women. The question would be then who these chosen men are, and who are the men whom God does not favor. Also, who are the other women God prefers to men? A lot of questions. Since we cannot know the answer to these questions, such interpretation must be immediately discarded. What is indeed correct to say is that God has given to some men and women more strength than to other men and women. This view is supported by the following verse: see how we have bestowed more on some than on others, but verily the hereafter is more in rank and graduation and more in excellence. Isra 21. We have dismissed the notion that Allah has put men in charge of women. We are now able to provide an ungendered explanation of Allah's preference, since Rijal refers to both men and women. We believe that a high competence, moral strength, determination, education, and strong cultural awareness will always put some men and women in charge of others who do not excel in these things at the same level. People are very different in this respect. Some men and women will always outperform others in their activities. Some women are stronger than other women and other men. Some men are stronger than other women and other men, because God has given to some more than others. The same applies to financial and economic power. Some people will always have more than others. This is what line 3 says: because they, the qawwamuna, support them, the others, from their means. Financial power is not, however, always coupled with cultural competence. Rich tycoons who own several companies, for example, are often incapable of running their business without the help of more competent and better qualified people. And yet, because of their financial prowess, they will remain in charge, qawama, and dictate the overall strategies of their companies. Financial and economic power can be found in every level of society, in families, small businesses, political parties, sports clubs, international companies, and so on, and is exercised in most cases heedless of cultural competence. The point we want to stress is that qawama is not, as traditional exegetics suggested, only located within the realm of family and between husband and wife. Guardianship is found everywhere where cultural competence and financial power are necessary. in schools, universities, farm, factories, football clubs, ministries, hospitals, nurseries, banks, insurance companies, and estate agencies that are basically in all aspects of society. The universal aspect of our notion of guardianship lies in the fact that we find examples of cultural and financial strength everywhere in history, be it in ancient Rome, Palmyra, or Russia, or also everywhere on the planet, be it in Egypt, Syria, England, Turkey, India, Pakistan, or Indonesia. This proves how absurd it is to identify guardianship solely with the male sex and conclude from this an essential and everlasting superiority over men and women. Some exegetists have tried to justify their misogynist views by referring to verse 36 of Surah Al-Imran, which in their opinion reiterates God's preference of boys to girls. In the past, life was characterized by hard work and physical labor. This meant that, at least in terms of public presence, men had an advantage over women. Because of such physical superiority and public dominance, al-rijal and qawama were naturally associated with men. However, things have changed and technological progress has wiped out the advantage that physical labor once had over what used to be considered soft work: education, administration, service, and intellectual and creative activities. Women are now not only active in almost all branches of industry, commerce, and agriculture, they have also taken up leading positions in politics and in cities' boardrooms. Moreover, data from medical and educational research show that we can once and for all discard the myth that women are biologically and intellectually disadvantaged. Women live longer than men, suffer less often from heart disease, and girls do better in almost all school and university exams. Fact. As for guardianship on the level of family, research has shown that children are happy if both parents do the housework together, if they show kindness and respect to each other, and if at least one parent is willing to put in the hard work to show a high degree of family commitment and to provide strong leadership. And yet, not everyone is willing or able to take on the same amount of responsibility, because some are naturally better than others in organizing family life. In some families, there are strong husbands who provide the necessary leadership. In others, it will be the wife who takes up this role. And if both have strong personalities and high social and emotional competence, they will, following the principle of equivalence, make the decisions together. We therefore interpret guardians as follows: those who have strength, competence, and power, male or female, who will provide leadership to those who follow them or those who come after them. Al-nisa, first place, second place, president, vice president, and so on. Because there's only one room for number one. And then there's number two. There's one room at the top. In the term of ability and competence, male or female, continuation, God gave more to those who possess qawama, male or female, than others. The gist of our argument is rather than defining guardianship as a characteristics of men, we believe that women can acquire it as well. Righteous women are not those who are obedient or who pray fast or pray or fast or give alms, as many exegetists have it, but those who possess qawama. This is the theme of the verse after all, that is, those who do competent work and provide leadership. The crucial term is salihat, which many too hastily have understood as devout and pious women who pray and fast. The word salihat tells us that righteous women who possess qawama, that is, those to whom God has given special skills and the power of leadership, they guard what God would have them guard. What God has given to them in terms of special gifts and talent, and if they use their talent for the benefit of all, they are righteous women, salihat. What happens, however, is a woman does not possess these qualities and skills. What if she once had all the characterizes all that characterizes good guardianship, but lost it by wasting her skills and talents? In this case, a woman becomes what is the book calls nashiza, a woman who, because of her negative behavior, is unfaithful to her talents and who rebels against her good nature. Having addressed righteous woman, verse 34 of chapter 4 continues by saying, if you fear high-handedness, nushuz, from your wives, as translated, it basically says that nushuz women squander God's special gift and do not guard what God would have them guard. The rest of the verse explains the procedure of dealing with the problem of nushuz. Admonish them first, next refuse to share their beds, and last idrubuhinna. But if they return, seek not against them means of annoyance, for God is most high, great above you all. Nisa 34. By exclusively attaching this verse to the realm of marital relationship, some exegetists thought that nushuz meant a wife's refusal to obey her husband's order. However, marital disobedience is not at all the theme of the verse, which is in fact focuses on a description of general leadership and guardianship. Also, nushuz connotes a much wider meaning of disapproval and discord than just marital disobedience, which is evident in the following verse. O you who believe, when you are told to make room in the assembly, spread out and make room. Ample room will God provide for you. And when you are told to rise up in shuzu, rise up in shuzu. Mujadala, verse 11. This is evidence enough to suggest that nushuz cannot be rendered as the state of a wife's recalcitrance, or as some traditionalists suggest, as her refusal to pray, fast, and pay zakah. It is closer to the the truth and to the spirit of the whole verse to say that nushuz means the lack of qawama in a woman. If she has lost her temper and has her turned into an unkind, impatient, and pretentious person, she has lost her qawama, or shall we say commonly responsibility. If she has become self-opinionated and high-handed in everything she does and takes all her decisions autocratically, she has also lost qawama. This may be paralleled by the loss of qunut, as explained in previously, that is what God asked her to preserve. For example, if a wife gossips and reveals marital secrets to others, the important point to stress is that all women can become guilty of nushuz, whether they are married or not. Be they sisters or who are rude to their brothers, mothers who are mean to their children, or grandmothers who treat their children and grandchildren with disdain and disrespect. The verse indicates that needs to be done in these circumstances. Admonition and warning for advice first. Then, if the woman is married, a refusal to share her bed. Finally, if these things fail, she should be punished by the withdrawal of her right of guardianship. These three steps of solving the crisis only make sense if we accept that a woman actually possesses qawama, because if they did not, if qawama, the provision of strong leadership and financial power, was the sole prerogative of men, the suggested solution to the problem of nushuz would be entirely pointless.